Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. My most recent episode, I dived into the career of the prodigy B.J. Penn, his return this Sunday on FS1. I am elated to see that return. I have a lot of thoughts on that return. B.J. Penn coming back, I was a little bit worried about it, but now that he is at Greg Jackson's gym preparing for this fight, with a former fighter from Greg Jackson's gym, a young gun in Yair Rodriguez. This fight is a huge fight in the UFC featherweight division, and it could be B.J. Penn's last, or it could be the start to an improbable comeback. Very exciting stuff. Tune into that last track of the Thomas Take, and keep your ears open for this one. Bellator 170, January 21st, the week after B.J. Penn's return, 6 days after B.J. Penn's return, at the Forum in Los Angeles, California. Tito Ortiz, the Huntington Beach bad boy, will take on the bad guy, Chael Sonnen, the American gangster, the former UFC middleweight contender, the former UFC light heavyweight contender, will take on the former UFC light heavyweight champion in Tito Ortiz. This is a huge fight for Bellator. This is probably the biggest marquee matchup that Bellator has ever put on. Bellator is a very young company, a company that has only been around for about 8 years, but they have deep pockets. They are owned by Viacom, one of the largest corporations in the world today, and they have kind of cherry-picked certain talent from the UFC, maybe guys that might be disgruntled, or guys that don't feel appreciated, or guys that the UFC just simply didn't want back. Case in point, Benson Henderson and Rory McDonald. But these two guys are that are, not past their prime, but had they still be in the UFC, they probably would not be successful. So they moved on to Bellator, and they are both on what Chael Sonnen refers to as a Legends ass-kicking tour. Tito Ortiz fought Stephan Bonner to a fight in his last appearance in Bellator. Actually, his last appearance in Bellator was against Liam McGeary, who was the light heavyweight champion at the time, and Tito Ortiz lost via submission. But Tito did get a legend fight out of the way with Stephan Bonner, and now he is fighting Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen's first return to action in 3 years. So the question is Chael at a point where he will have ring rust heading into this fight with Tito Ortiz? Only time will tell. One question that I have about Chael is Chael in the shape that he was in when he was fighting previously 3 years ago? That I'm a little bit concerned about. But in a matchup where he's fighting Tito Ortiz, who has not fought in 2 years himself, the advantage is pretty much both ways. It's pretty much even. That's an even split. Tito hasn't fought in quite some time. Chael hasn't fought in quite some time. So neither one of them have youth on their side. Tito Ortiz, though, as far as a light heavyweight, an MMA light heavyweight, Tito is a big 205-pounder, a big 205-pound fighter. Chael Sonnen fought at middleweight the majority of his career in the UFC, and in bits and pieces he fought at light heavyweight. He's a small light heavyweight, and he did not fare well in his later run at light heavyweight. His only fight, I believe, that he won as a light heavyweight in his second act at light heavyweight in the UFC was against Shogun Rua, who has fallen on some hard times as an MMA fighter at that point. So who do I think will win this fight? It's more about the spectacle that this will be. I'm very excited for the spectacle that we will see at Bellator 170. We know that both of these guys are two of the best, two of the biggest names in MMA history, two of the biggest names in UFC history. They're fighting under a banner that is practically brand new in comparison to the UFC, trying to help build that brand and making that brand more of a household name like the UFC is now. One advantage that Bellator has is that they haven't really broken into the pay-per-view market too much. The majority of their fights are live and free on Spike TV, so you will be able to watch this on TV for free with no money down whatsoever, no $60, no $55, $65 HD. You will be able to go to Spike TV, turn it on your TV, and watch it from start to finish. The co-main event is a great co-main event as well. Paul Daly will take on Brennan Ward, two guys that will provide fireworks in the co-main event, two guys that have gone toe-to-toe with virtually every opponent that they have ever faced. That is a big fight in the welterweight division in Bellator. That's a good fight to put on with this event, with this main event being Tito Ortiz and Chael Sonnen. And they're fighting in a big venue. The Forum was the event that hosted UFC 199, where Luke Rockhold faced Michael Bisping. We know what happened there. Bisping won the belt from Luke Rockhold. Also, we saw Dominic Cruz defend his belt in the final act with Uriah Faber, the third fight out of their trilogy, the long time waiting 5 years in the making fight that really turned out to be a dud. But that being said, who do I think will win the fight? Both of these guys are wrestlers. Tito Ortiz was a ground and pound type fighter. Chael Sonnen, obviously a ground and pound type fighter. Chael Sonnen is more notoriously known for going to the ground and not letting a guy breathe, where Tito Ortiz is known to strike a little bit and then take guys down and really ground and pound to finish the fight, where Chael Sonnen is a lay on you, kind of dominate you, demoralize you type fighter. So two different styles, kind of one and the same. How do I see it going down? I think Chael Sonnen will win this fight. Although he has had a long layoff, I think Chael Sonnen has the best double leg still to this day in mixed martial arts. I doubt he has lost his touch on that. He does seem as if he's a guy that is constantly training, constantly trying to improve, and I think he has a big chip on his shoulder heading into this fight with Tito Ortiz. The Tito Ortiz that we have seen in recent memory is a far cry from the Tito Ortiz that we saw back in the day, back in the early 2000s when he was defending his UFC light heavyweight belt. I think those days are long gone. He retired from the UFC after his fight with Forrest Griffin maybe 4 or 5 years ago and decided to come back to Bellator due to the fact that, he probably wanted to make some money. I don't know where he is at as a fighter. I know that he's in great physical shape for this fight. I know Chael has done a lot of shit talking to piss Tito off, and Tito is in fantastic shape heading into this fight. Every promo that I've seen, Tito looks yoked as hell. That is one advantage that I think could come back to haunt Chael Sonnen, the fact that Tito might be in better shape than him. That could be a problem, especially when Tito Ortiz is a natural UFC 205-pound fighter, and Chael Sonnen is not. Chael Sonnen is more of a middleweight than a light heavyweight. You saw a huge difference in those two fighters at those two different weights, in Chael Sonnen as a light heavyweight and in Chael Sonnen as a middleweight. As a middleweight, he was a straight terror, winning, climbing the ladder, getting that final opportunity against Anderson Silva, going 4.5 rounds, beating Anderson Silva pillar to post. The judges' scorecards at the time were all unanimous for Chael Sonnen. Had that round not ended via finish for Anderson Silva, Chael Sonnen would have been the first man to defeat Anderson Silva in the UFC. He works his way back towards the rematch, beating Michael Bisping, beating Brian Stann. And to this day, I want to make this very clear. To this day, I feel as if this was a ridiculous moment in mixed martial arts. Chael Sonnen does a spinning back fist on Anderson Silva. He slips and falls. Anderson Silva walks Chael Sonnen down. Chael scoots his back to the cage while he's sitting on his butt, and Anderson Silva throws a knee that landed on both his face and his stomach. That's an illegal strike. And then Anderson Silva got on top of Chael and finished the fight. It was an illegal strike, very much like when Michael Bisping's mouthpiece fell out, and Bisping pointed at his mouthpiece. The ref did a terrible job of pausing the action, and Anderson Silva took advantage of it, running up to Michael Bisping, kneeing him in the chin, and dropping him, almost knocking him out unconscious. It's a miracle. It's an unfathomable miracle that Michael Bisping even was able to come back from that, let alone win that fight via decision. So, with that being said, Chael Sonnen was moments away from being a UFC champion on several occasions. The first fight with Anderson Silva, about a minute and a half left, he gets submitted via triangle choke. The second fight with Anderson Silva, he gets that illegal strike to the face, and Yves Levine doesn't even call it. And then the UFC fight where Chael Sonnen got a UFC light heavyweight title fight, due in large part to the fact that Dan Henderson fell out of UFC 151. The event was canceled. Chael Sonnen said he'd like to step in, and the UFC wanted to make that happen, but John Jones said he's no way in hell is he fighting Chael Sonnen on 8 days' notice. It turned into its own side story. They did fight, I believe it was at UFC 155 or 153, and maybe it was UFC 160. I can't remember, because I know Jones fought Vitor. Anyway, they ended up fighting anyway, and John Jones had his toes completely separated. His big toe was completely ripped off practically. And that was after John Jones beat Chael Sonnen via TKO. If that didn't happen, and that was like 1 minute left in one of the first few rounds, if that didn't happen, then Chael Sonnen would have won the fight on a technicality, and Chael Sonnen would have been the champ because John Jones couldn't continue. So Chael Sonnen has had some bad luck in his mixed martial arts career. He really has, and I'm not making excuses for the guy. I'm just saying how it's crazy that he has had those situations go against him in those fashions, and he hasn't said hardly anything about it. And other fighters like Brian Stann have even commented on it, and Kenny Florian has even commented on those very same subjects as well. In terms of Tito Ortiz, he was the UFC light heavyweight champ. He kind of ducked Chuck Liddell. He ducked Randy Couture. He eventually fought Randy Couture before fighting Chuck Liddell, and Randy Couture whooped that ass. Then Randy and Chuck had their thing going on. Then Tito fought Chuck Liddell finally, and he was unable to beat Chuck Liddell both times. They were going to fight a third time a few years back. Tito Ortiz cried that he broke his neck. Chuck Liddell said that's bullshit, that's not true, saying to Dana White on the Ultimate Fighter set, I knew Tito was not going to show up for that fight. So Tito Ortiz has kind of been 1 foot in, 1 foot out the door for quite some time. I think there were some management issues with his career with him and Dana White. I know that there was management issues with him and Dana White over the course of his career where he was in the UFC and he just felt like he was completely disrespected. So he retired and then went to the first organization that would have him besides the UFC, and that was Bellator. So Tito Ortiz, it's his final fight, and it very well should be. He's fought a very long time, but like BJ Penn, Tito Ortiz is one of those guys that where would the UFC be without Tito Ortiz? Where would mixed martial arts be without Tito Ortiz? You can say what you want, and there's plenty to say, but you know, Tito Ortiz was the first face of the UFC, of the Zuffa era UFC. He was the first guy that they built the mixed martial arts landscape around. He's pretty much the Conor McGregor of yesteryear. And I think that's valid. I really do. He was one of the first UFC pay-per-view draws under the Zuffa banner. Besides Hoist Gracie and Ken Shamrock, Tito Ortiz was right there. You also got Mark Coleman and Pat Miletich and Matt Hughes, guys like that really helped build the sport along the way. And Tito Ortiz was one of those guys. Although I think Tito Ortiz is in great shape, I do see Chael winning the fight via decision. That's my take on the Bellator 170 main event, Ortiz versus Sonnen, and I also have Brennan Ward beating Paul Daly in a devastating back-and-forth slobber-knocker brawl. That was the Thomas Take. Take care.